All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating topic. We're going to decode the dual-sided financial nature of GMO technology in the agricultural chemical sector. It's such an interesting space because it sits directly at the crossroads of cutting-edge science, deeply held public opinions, and seriously complex global regulations. For chemical companies making crop seeds, this tech is a massive market opportunity, but at the exact same time, it carries huge financial risks. We're going to unpack exactly how that equation balances out on the corporate ledger.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the Agtech opportunity, look at consumer skepticism, map out the global regulatory landscape, weigh the financial risks and costs, and finally, wrap up with the GMO accounting equation. All right, part 1, the Agtech opportunity, innovation in the fields. So let's make sure we're totally on the same page before we get too deep. What exactly is a GMO? Well, according to the SASB Sustainability Accounting Standard for the chemical sector, it's an organism, other than a human being, of course, where the genetic material has been altered in a way that just wouldn't happen naturally through mating or natural recombination. This specific definition is crucial. It gives financial analysts and chemical companies a rock-solid, zero-ambiguity baseline to work from when calculating market exposure.
Now, here's where the massive upside comes in. Chemical entities are literally engineering direct solutions to some of humanity's biggest agricultural headaches. We're talking about seeds with altered resistance to pests and herbicides, or crops that can actually survive brutal droughts. And the result? Huge improvements in crop yields for global staples like corn and soy. I mean, as our global population explodes and climate stress ramps up, the demand for these resilient, high-yield crops is an absolute goldmine for the chemicals industry. That is the opportunity side of the equation.
Moving on to Section 2, consumer skepticism and pushback, the market reality. But here's the thing, science doesn't just operate in a vacuum, right? So what happens when these incredible, undeniable benefits in crop yields smash headfirst into complex consumer perceptions? Well, it's a textbook example of how public sentiment can instantly make or break market viability. You end up with this wild split-screen reality in the market. On one hand, out in the fields, you've got these lush, high-yield cornfields practically laughing off drought conditions. The exact Agtech win we just talked about. But then, you walk into a grocery store, and right there on the shelf, you see everyday products totally leaning into strict, non-GMO labels to win over wary shoppers. Chemical companies are caught right in the middle, constantly trying to balance pure agricultural efficiency on the left with powerful consumer purchasing behaviors on the right. And look at how the official standard captures that tension perfectly. The SASB standard neutrally points out the very real concern over GMO tech due to the perceived health, environmental, and social impacts. Perceived is absolutely the key word there. Look, regardless of where the hard scientific consensus lands on safety, if consumers believe there are impacts, that perception completely dictates market behavior. Those perceived impacts are the literal root cause of the financial risks these ag tech companies are facing. Which brings us to Section 3, the global regulatory landscape, navigating the rules. Because, consumer concern doesn't just stay quietly in the grocery aisles. It gets loud, and it scales up into serious legal hurdles across the globe. If you look at a global map of GMO regulation, it's not a unified front at all. It's a total patchwork of strict rules. Step 1, you might see entire countries implementing flat-out product bans on certain GMO seeds. If they aren't banned, Step 2 is often the enforcement of really tight regional sales quotas. And Step 3, even if you clear those hurdles, you get hit with super strict product labeling requirements. These are not minor inconveniences. They are massive barriers to entry. Let's look at Section 4, financial risks and costs, the bottom line.
So how does all this actually hit the corporate balance sheet? Basically, this regulatory landscape directly offsets that massive ag tech opportunity we started with. Strict product bans in key markets, that's an immediate drop in revenue. You literally can't sell your innovation. Those labeling requirements, they aren't just about slapping a new sticker on a box. They force companies to run completely segregated supply chains, which drastically pumps up manufacturing and logistics costs. Plus, the constant regulatory scrutiny means an ongoing reputational risk. Every new headline forces these companies to spend resources just to defend their social license to operate. Finally, Section 5. The GMO accounting equation, measuring the balance. So with all these push and pull forces, how in the world do financial analysts and investors actually track how well a chemical entity is navigating this minefield?
We use this very specific SASB accounting metric, RT-CH410C1. I know it sounds like just a random string of letters and numbers, but it actually serves as the ultimate scorecard for managing these exact high-stakes market risks. Here's what that metric actually tracks: the percentage of products by revenue that contain genetically modified organisms. It is brilliantly simple but incredibly revealing. By forcing chemical entities to lay out the exact percentage of their revenue that's tied to GMOs, the standard provides a totally transparent look at their exposure. A high percentage, that means the company is really cashing in on the Agtech upside, but, and this is a big but, they are heavily exposed to those regulatory bans and the consumer backlash we discussed. It quantifies the risk perfectly. And honestly, that is exactly why standardized frameworks like the ISSB and SASB standards are absolute game changers for investors today. They force companies to account for this incredibly delicate balancing act in a totally uniform way. They take all these abstract environmental debates, loud consumer protests, and messy global policies and translate them into cold, hard, comparable financial data. You aren't just guessing anymore. You're looking at the actual revenue percentages. So I'll leave you with this provocative thought to chew on. The pressures on both sides of this equation are only increasing. Climate stress will unequivocally demand higher crop yields, pushing the need for ag-tech innovation. Yet consumers are simultaneously demanding stricter labels and much more transparent supply chains. The GMO equation is only going to become more complex for agricultural chemical entities over the next few decades. Understanding how to measure that balance is really the key to navigating the future of the chemical sector. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep questioning the data.